probably a broadcasting evil. It's something that's, I loved doing Football Heaven and Praise or Grumble for the years that I did it, and I just thought that there were so many great moments in it. However, the flip side of it actually is over the last 3 or 4 years, I think this has come along with the advent of more use of social media, message boards, whereby on Saturday nights you used to go to the game, you used to go to the pub, and okay, you might have a bit of a rant on the way to the pub, but actually by the time you're on to your 4th or 5th pint, well, it wasn't that bad today, we'll get them next week. I don't think that situation ever really comes around now, because people go and they have all the pints in the pub, get home and they get on the forum or they get on Twitter and it's all stoked up to it, but it's still there on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the stuff from last Saturday. And in some respects the football phone-in has done just the same. It has dragged out issues that keep going throughout the whole of the week, which, from a journalistic perspective, that's the job that you've got to do. From a football perspective, maybe it's just given things a slightly more negative edge. The number of times chairmen have got together and tried to see whether they can have Football Heaven taken off the air or Praise or Grumble taken off the air, it's incredible. And you go in and you have that meeting and be like, well, look, if you don't like it, don't listen.
Hang on, meetings actually had taken place with football chairman, Radio Sheffield, trying to get your thing. Yeah,
they have conversations about it, and they would, they'd like the football phone-in taken off air because it doesn't serve their purpose, and understandably so, because they don't see it as being an hour's advertising every night. They see it as being an hour for the malcontents to give their viewpoints, and as with most people, football chairmen hear the negative rather than the positive far louder.
How many people bring phone-in shows have actually been to the game and they're complaining?
I don't know, it's a hard one to tell, because the difficulty is, and TV figures will tell you this, the vast majority of people that are interested in football don't go to the games. You watch a big game, you watch Match of the Day on Saturday night, and there's X million viewers. Well, there aren't X million people watching Premier League football, so there are an awful lot of people that don't go to the game. But now with Sky being able to get the goals on so quickly on a Saturday evening, and the sendings off and what have you, and with the Football League show on a Saturday night, by Sunday morning, by the first football phone-in that you're going to do again on the Monday, everybody's seen everything 3 times over, and they've watched it fast, they've watched it slow, they've reanalysed it, and the other thing is, everybody now thinks that they are an expert or a pundit, because I've done it, pause. Was that inside or outside the area? Okay, I've spent 15 minutes doing that. The linesman and referee had 1 chance, and we all second guess the managers afterwards. Well, why do you pick him? We all know after 90 minutes when it's not worked that was the wrong decision.
Managers have told me they don't listen to radio phone-ins, football phone-ins. Do you believe it?
What a load of rubbish. The keenest listeners. There was one football manager, he'll remain nameless for the purposes of this interview, but you'll be able to figure out who it is. He would often record Saturday's Praise or Grumble.
Oh no, how sad.
And listen to it when he was in. And that same manager now possesses one of these iPhones, and he told me, isn't it great? You can get Radio Sheffield wherever I am in country. And he would sit there and listen to Football Heaven when he was managing other football clubs, and he would always have things to say about people that would come on the show, and you'd be like, if you don't like it, don't listen. But the other side of it is, you know what to expect when the chairman calls you in, because there's every chance that the chairman has been listening, and he might throw some of the accusations, and
probably word for word.
Quite often, I think that's been the case. There are chairmen who do religiously listen, and you know what, flip side of that, there are football clubs, football managers. Neil Warnock was probably the very best at using that programme to get the most for him, and there were times when he would phone up at 5 to 6 and go, lads, I've got a story for you, knowing that was going to take over the hour of that programme, knowing that giving it to us at 10 to 6, whether it's a new signing, whether it's this, whether it's that, whether it's the other, knowing that even him agreeing to come on at the top of the programme would sort of organise our agenda for the rest of the night. He was very smart with how he did that, and other clubs have kind of caught on to that. But still they don't realise that, hang on a minute, if we can talk about you for an hour rather than the other 5 clubs, isn't that a better way to go from a club perspective, knowing what your next game is? Look at how resilient he is. You know, there aren't too many people that have had top flight experience as he did with Notts County, as he did with Sheffield United, as he did with QPR, yet still has a desire to go back in, a man in his 60s, and do it all over again. And he doesn't care whether he's managing Leeds. He would have loved the Sheffield Wednesday job. Truthfully, who's Neil Warnock in it for? He's in it for Neil Warnock.
Did he take the job?
I think there's a time when he definitely would have. I think financially now, and at this stage of his life, does he really need that? Because, you know, essentially he could be onto a loser from the start. Because even if he got Sheffield Wednesday promoted back to the Premier League, even if he did everything right, there would still be but he's a blade. And the first hurdle that he fell over, there would be people right down his throat trying to get rid of him. Because there would be a perception that he was doing it intentionally, and the United, a bit like Danny Wilson now. But Danny's handled that situation wonderfully, with so much dignity, and not too many people that get booed in on the first day. I guess he shares that now with Rafa Benitez. It's really hard.
They don't trust you. I mean, they don't trust that slot journey.
No, they don't. And particularly when you go from somebody that you get on with, somebody that you like, somebody that you perhaps don't believe should have been sacked, to having, a guy that comes in from nowhere and you're like looking at him going, what have they seen in him that nobody else has? And you kind of just looking at it, just going, this is an absurd decision. I'll talk about the fact that I was one of the few journalists that had a very strong relationship with Sean O'Driscoll. And Sean is somebody who I think is a phenomenal coach. I think he's a very good manager. I think he's often misunderstood because if he doesn't know you, why should he talk to you? And if you're going to ask him a daft question, he will either tell you that or give you a daft answer. If you ask him a proper question, he will give you a thoughtful, proper answer.
Howard Wilkinson of his day.
Yeah, you know what, very, very much so. And he's somebody who, when he was replaced by Dean Saunders, you're looking at it going like, hang on a second, you got a guy here that has, he had a terrific career, he was a very good player. He's been at Wrexham, for God's sake. He's got no idea what the Championship's all about. They've got some harebrained scheme about bringing players in on loan, right, left and centre, that Sean would never have stood for, which was one of the reasons why he went. And then you've got to build a relationship with this guy, knowing that everybody on the inside of the club kind of feels the same way, but they've made that decision. I mean, I had a fairly frank exchange of views with John Ryan on air, and John's somebody who I've known for donkey's years at Donny Rovers. He's somebody who I've been a staunch advocate of, because rather than slag off other teams or anything else, all he kept saying was, why don't you come down to Donny, we play great football. And if you're unhappy with your team, come and give us a go, because we're worth watching. And he understood that, and he was always willing to come on, and off the record he was always very candid as to what was going on, and if you happen to catch him at a bad time, well, that manager might be getting the sack that in the next 15 minutes, but if you talk to him for 15 minutes, that manager wouldn't be getting the sack for the next 5 years. He's somebody who was always great, but we really crossed swords over Sean's departure from there. And you know what, to a certain degree, Kevin McCabe, over several appointments that he made, the Brian Robson appointment being probably one of them, the Mickey Adams appointment as well, and quite often when a manager goes, you're privy to exactly what's going on. I can't remember the number of times where me or one of my colleagues ends up as the go-between. Managers in work, they need somebody who knows both parties, and next thing you know, you're the one that's carrying messages from A to B. And so you're on the inside of the deal in that respect, and when it's good for you, that's great. Well, Well, I was good. You know, my first 2 Sheffield Wednesday games were the last for the 2 respective managers.
No.
Yeah, they were. The first one was Peter Shreves.
Right.
And I remember I was a bit green. I said, what do you do now? Well, I've got to go and take a long look at myself in the mirror, was his answer. I don't know what my future is. I don't know whether I've still got some time to go or whether maybe now's the time for me to move on. And I didn't seize on that as I would have done now. I seized on it a little bit, but, you know, I didn't realise that those were going to be his final quotes really on Sheffield Wednesday. He walked out the next day. Terry Yorath was the next man to disappear after that. You know, another really good guy. And he actually held a post-departure press conference, which was, you know, he was a classic guy like that. And he thanks everybody for what they'd done for him, and he was quite happy to answer the questions afterwards. But I suppose my stronger relationships came after that, with the likes of Chris Turner, Paul Sturrock, then from Paul Sturrock he went to Brian Laws, and then kind of on from there. Brian Laws great for the media, understands the game, you know, completely gets it. You could have asked him any question. There was no question that was completely off the radar for him. And that's great, because he'd try and answer it. Sometimes he was unfortunate, sometimes he couldn't answer it, sometimes he was put in a bit of a difficult position, but he would always try, and he would never fall out with you about it afterwards. He might look at you and go, God, that was a bit tough, wasn't it? But for the most part, he was great, and somebody that, you know, socially I've enjoyed a good relationship with afterwards. And Russ Wilcox, his assistant, is one of the finest people football's ever had. You know, just a great guy. And it helped, didn't it, with the Sheffield derby. So I was looking back at the fixtures the other week, and it was Scunthorpe against Bury, and it brought together two very passionate men in Kevin Blackwell and Brian Laws. And Lawsy had the better of that relationship, and that ate Kevin Blackwell up. He absolutely hated it, and Lawsy loved it, and he played to the crowd, you know, running up and down the touchline. He got his scarf on and thrown it into the crowd. And you know what, those were some of the best games I got the opportunity to cover. That game at Bramwell Lane on a Tuesday night was just, I mean, from a Wednesday perspective, all right, you give away a 2-goal lead, but the way that James Beattie scored that goal, the atmosphere, you didn't know where to look, because there was something happening, whether it was in the stands or on the pitch or whatever, and the post-match was just as fiery. I mean, Paul, again, just another really good football man, and he's somebody that you still have the relationship with, you know, long afterwards. And
he's left the region.
When he was down at Plymouth, every time I would go down there, I'd loved covering games at Plymouth. Give him a ring or drop him a text, and usually get the reply of, Luggy's bar's open tonight, you know, curry for tea you're buying, that kind of thing. And you know, what you don't realise, and maybe this is me being slightly younger, what a bloody good footballer he was.
Oh yes.
And he's got
scrapping together.
Well, and you think that probably if it hadn't been for Kenny Dalglish, he would have been viewed as being probably one of the better Scottish players of his generation. And you look around that room, you've got the Dundee United European shirts, you've got all of his Scotland International shirts that are up there. But he's just a footballaholic, you know, he'll sit there and he's got every football channel known to man. He'll be watching the Azerbaijani second division if he possibly can. You know, if he can watch football rather than anything else, then he'll do. But he's a character. You know what he had was, he was that perfect buffer between people who make decisions and the manager, because he would pass the messages down from above in a way that the manager would appreciate, and in the same way, when the owner or chairman is ranting and raving and all upset, he would go and you know, tomorrow's another day. Sun's going to come up. Let's see how we feel then. And when you go and interview, you know, every so often you realise you're in a privileged position. I never saw Derek Dooley play. You know, he was sacked as Sheffield Wednesday manager before I think I was born. And at that point, I still realised what I was sitting next to. And it was a little bit like interviewing your granddad. Because he was just, and he treated you very much in that way that he almost, in an unpatronising way, would pat you on the head and
He patted me on the head when I was a teenager, and he patted me on the head when I was in my 40s.
but you kind of didn't mind it, and whenever he saw you, hey Seth, how you doing? You alright? Yeah, Derek, are you alright? Yeah, fine. How's things going? Oh well, be alright if it weren't for this leg. It always felt like you were learning something sitting next to
It
it.
was proper footballing, man, and a lot of the people running football clubs now up and down the country aren't.
No, and there are a lot of people who are businessmen, very bad businessmen, because football ain't a business as far as I'm concerned.
Really?
If you're on that side of things, well, it's not. I mean, you can't describe something that loses as much money as pretty much every single football club. Most of them are running insolvently. If it was any other business, there would be people looking around saying, "This doesn't work." I think that there's, to me, an awful lot of it is ego, and people, you get involved in football, and I know people on lots of different levels where this has happened to them, and it becomes like an addiction. And for him, I think Milan has an addiction to football, and I think that okay, there is a business situation for him to be there, and he sees a scenario whereby Sheffield Wednesday could be profitable for him. But I think for him, there's an awful lot more of the, look at me, I led you. Look at where you were when we started. Look at where you were when I finished.
Well, back where we were when you started.
But hopefully, if he achieves all of his goals, he can take Wednesday back to that division. And there is an arrogance, and I say that in a good way, of people who have the money to take over Championship football clubs, where they feel they can make the difference. And in the same way that there's an arrogance in a football manager that can take a Joey Barton or a player of that ilk, and they will get the best out of them. Because you always see something with an ability or something with potential, and where everybody else has failed, you think, well, I'm not going to make those mistakes. I will be the difference. And I think that's probably one of the things. But I think it's very fair to say there's a lot of chairmen. I think chairmen do over two things. You get guys who do it for the love, and then that becomes the obligation. I think Kevin McCabe feels obligated to Sheffield United right now. I think Barry Hubbard at Chesterfield felt obligated when they went into trouble. I think you get other guys that come and they do it, and they see it as being an opportunity for them to enjoy the prestige of their position and to be able to make a difference in that way.
Does Dave Allen fit into that?
Yeah. And there is a certain irony here. Is Dave Allen could have been the best chairman Sheffield Wednesday ever had. But he wasn't, because in the end he was somebody that took things personally, and his skin wasn't thick enough. His other businesses, if somebody wanders into a casino and starts acting up and saying things that they don't like about you, just boot them out, and that's it. You bar them, and you can't run a football club like that, because as a chairman you're always just a custodian. And the thing with Dave, his biggest problem was a PR problem. He put money into Sheffield Wednesday. He probably put as much, if not more, money than Milan Mandrić has. And he's somebody that whenever that big signing was required, you look at the players that came into Sheffield Wednesday during his time, that then, Glenn Whelan, Chris Brunt, international players, that have gone on to be terrific. And there are a load more that I can't even think of at this point. But if he would have, I think if his ego would have been more stroked by the fans, I think he would have put more in. And I think he was probably badly advised by those on the inside, and he probably was a little bit too close for comfort to what was going on, and that was Dave.
But his bad experience at Sheffield Wednesday doesn't stop him from going down the road to Sheffield and starting all over again.
But he sees that there's money to be made there on a bigger scale, with things that could be happening in the town of Chesterfield in terms of putting a stamp down with a casino at some point in the future, but also having a city or a town that doesn't have a facility to do the business conferences and the corporate stuff that they can do down there now. What was the B2 Net, and he saw that and he realised that's a pretty shrewd business investment for him. And also it's the local team, and also, you know what, putting 150 grand into Chesterfield makes a difference to buy a player. I look at the league table and I'm deeply concerned, but my major concern was about signings in the summer. Granted, I've not seen as much of Sheffield Wednesday as many people that will be watching this interview, but my feeling was the players that came into the football club didn't improve that much on what was already there, and in fact you could say they downgraded, because Danny Bart to me is a superior player than what he's been replaced with. So when you know that, you step up a division but you don't get better as a squad, but you spend money. I start to ask the question, why? You know, why are we doing this then? You know, why am I spending all this money per week on a player that has never been? You know, Gardner has never been a player anyway. As a host of a radio phone-in, one of your jobs is to play devil's advocate. One is to afford a little bit of protection for the managers and for the football clubs, because they're not there to defend themselves. And in the same way as when you go and interview a chairman, you know, you're not going to make apologies for a chairman when you're interviewing him. You've got to go and hit him with everything that you've got. So they feel like you're always against them. The fans feel that you're always protecting the clubs. So you're in this thing where you never win with anybody in terms of that. But you do have to just afford enough protection to the managers, I think. And, you know, the one line that upset me more than any is when you get guys come on and just say, he's not a manager. Kevin Blackwell's not a manager. Well, he is a manager, because you want to take a look at his record as manager of Leeds, Sheffield United, Luton, and now latterly at Bury. That tells you he's a football manager. You might not like how he does his business. Actually, what Kevin is brilliant at doing is being organised, getting a football club fit, healthy, finding a way of playing with what he's got available to him, with the cash that he's got available to him, and getting them to play in a disciplined manner. Gary Megson isn't too dissimilar to that. Both of them had this ability, really, to go in, get a club that's struggling a little bit and try and get it back on its feet again. And the big challenge for Kevin, and this is the argument he and I always used to have off the record, was, but Kevin, when are you going to become more than a 6-month man? Because you don't want to be just known as being that. He's like, I've got teams to 2 playoff finals, I've done this, that and the other. And it's like, yeah, but, you know, at what point do you take that on? Now, the question is, can he do that at somewhere like Bury? I suspect as soon as he has success at somewhere like Bury, there'll be bigger things for him to do within the world of football, and people will go on to look at him in a different way, I think. And I feel he's been given a raw deal, and I think particularly...
Coach. Sometimes people say, oh, he's just a coach, he's not a manager. That's probably what they're getting at.
Yeah, no, I think he's actually a very good manager in terms of the logistical side of it. What he needs around him is the people that will do sometimes the more touchy-feely side, that he was actually excellent at when he was under Neil Warnock. He was always the up. He was the one that was, you know, fist pumped, and he always got all the guys off the floor whenever Neil had come in and torn into them, and he got them going again. But he never had that within his staff, and that was always, to me, a big failing of his.
Final question. Every radio host of a football phone-in show, regularly, annually, daily, weekly, gets accused of being a supporter of one team or another.
Yeah.
You spent the first 20 years of your life in America or whatever. Now you're not at Radio Sheffield day in, day out. I'm giving you this opportunity. I'm giving you this opportunity to finally put it to rest, to come out with it and admit to all your faithful listeners at Radio Sheffield who you support.
It's so funny, this question, because actually it's not a big deal, but it's one of those things that's taken completely out of context, because there are people who, you know, will go back to Neil Warnock and they'll say, we can't commentate on our games because you want us to lose. Whether you're United or Wednesday, you never want the team you're commentating on to lose, because that just makes your job more difficult. So, you know, and the truth is, for me, I grew up watching both Sheffield United and Wednesday, because my granddad and my dad, both United fans, but my dad was more, you know, Man United are playing at Hillsborough, let's go down there. Arsenal are playing at Hillsborough, let's go down there. However, Sheffield United were in the 3rd division and they were cheap. And I grew up on Granville Road, walking distance. So when I first started to really follow football, it was the Tony Ogana, Brian Dean partnership at Bramall Lane, and they had a great deal of success. So I would say I was more red and white through that, but I've never had a season ticket at either. And I've never been somebody that didn't want to go to the other one. You know, when I was growing up, I was always quite happy to have tickets to go and watch Sheffield Wednesday, which I suppose now is more of a throwback. And actually some friends of ours growing up had season tickets at both, where we would go one week with them to United, the next week with them to Wednesday. So when it comes down to it, first result you look for, yeah, Sheffield United. And when it comes to United or Wednesday, I'd rather Sheffield United win that fixture. However, that makes you far from being a Sheffield Wednesday hater.
Seth the Blade, thank you very much for your time.
Piggy Blade, if you don't mind.